How you doing, Lord?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good. Thank you for asking. Lord, are you at least 18 and are you a believer?
Yeah, yeah, I'm 28 now, and I am a believer.
Cool. And what God do you believe in?
Jesus.
Okay. And what would be the most convincing evidence or argument for the God of Christianity being real?
Well, the main argument I come to in my head is like the prophecies of the Bible and the history behind it.
Like what?
Where, for example, like the one that everybody knows that I'm just going to refer to is the prophecy in Isaiah,
Isaiah 53?
Isaiah 9:6, I think.
Well, Isaiah 9:6 definitely isn't about Jesus, but you want to go over it?
In Isaiah 53, is that the one that talks about somebody being like butchered and brought in disgrace and mocked?
Not really. That I think you're referring to Psalm 22.
Okay, okay, we can go over Isaiah 53 or Isaiah 9:6
Well,
and
I'll
why
give you
you.
a choice. Going over Isaiah 9 will take about 5 minutes. Going over Isaiah 53 will take 30 minutes. So it's up to you.
Okay, well, since I initially thought of Isaiah 9:6, we can go over that one and why you believe it's not
Okay.
in alignment with the prophecy.
So I think Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 through 7 are a single unit. And so what we find in the chapter, it starts out, it says, there will be no gloom for those who were in anguish, although that's a fanciful translation. In actual Hebrew, it says that there is no gloom for those who were in anguish. So it's like present tense. It says, in the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, meaning now, he will make glorious the way of the sea and the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. And then he talks about how there's going to be like this military victory, right? It says the people who walk in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. Now, the New Testament says that this prophecy is kind of hinted because Jesus moved to Galilee, right? So when Jesus moved to Galilee, it says he did so to fulfill this prophecy when it says that light was brought to the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, namely the land of Galilee. And you could say that the author meant to tie this in with the whole prophecy because the prophecy kind of ends in verse 7, which I could agree. Listen, if you think that just the beginning of the prophecy was mentioned but the whole thing is technically about the same thing, I don't disagree with you there, but let's keep reading it. It says, the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For all the boots of the trampling warriors and the garments rolled in blood shall be burned as fuel for the fire. This is like clearly military victory, like military language, right?
Mhm. Yes, I would agree.
Right. Now, the reason why I think this is talking about military victory is because Isaiah's writing right after King Hezekiah has been born and is already going to be the next new king, or even as he's becoming the next king. And during this time period, Assyria already invaded and they're actually at this point in a retreat, right? So they're Syria invaded. They took out Aram and Damascus and some of the northern tribes like Naphtali, Zebulun, and whatnot, and Dan. And now they're at this point when Isaiah is writing, the Assyrians actually have pulled out and they're fighting wars elsewhere, right? So my understanding is that Isaiah, during the time of Hezekiah's youth, is saying, finally, we have some peace. And here's why, right? Because a child has been born for us, a son given to us, authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Great will be his authority, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and righteousness from this time onward forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. So now my interpretation of the passage is that this is a pretty typical enthronement prophecy for King Hezekiah when he was announced to be the next king. We find lots of parallels to this where kings like in ancient Egypt would have an enthronement prophecy, and they would be given like 4 or 5 theophoric names. So like this just reads like ancient.
That's not consistent with the whole scroll of Isaiah, though. He would be basically apostatizing his whole faith just
No,
in a single passage, because
no.
if he truly believes in Jehovah or Yahweh, whoever, and he confesses that throughout the scroll of Isaiah, then he would be apostatizing here, because the whole point of the relationship between Isaiah and God is that he's the one and only true God, and that there
I'm
is no idol
I'm
before
not
him.
suggesting that there's multiple gods to Isaiah.
Yeah, but giving a man these titles would be contradictory to Isaiah's whole faith.
No, that's not true.
It is,
No, it's
because
not
in the
true.
scroll. Okay, I want to hear why you think that.
Because lots of people in the Bible have theophoric names. It's just something you did in the ancient Near East, right? So
They do have theophoric names, but
giving somebody
like,
a theophoric name like El Gavor is not unique.
yeah, but like it is unique. It's actually not heard of for a Christian to give somebody a theophoric name. It's actually not in the Bible at all
Well,
for
it is.
somebody to give. So, like, if can you give me another example besides this passage where a prophet of God has given a man maybe titles of like mighty God or everlasting Father, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, you can get something like the name Hezekiah. His name literally means strength of Yahweh, or Yahweh is my strength, depending on how you translate it. You can get the name Gavriel.
Right. That's consistent, right? That's consistent with their belief systems. Is consistent with the Christian theology. To say that Isaiah, here is mentioning a king, especially when he's prophesizing. Maybe he is, right. But the
You
last,
you realize that theophoric names don't describe the king, right? They describe the god.
okay, so okay, maybe that's my misunderstanding. So you're saying in this passage, he is giving glory to. Well, he's talking about Hezekiah, but like glorifying him through Jehovah.
Yeah, yeah. No one's saying that the prophet is suggesting that Hezekiah is God.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the Hebrew says, but it does say everlasting God. And when you talk about
Well,
Father is an important part of it, because
well, it
only
says
Father can be
everlasting
like,
Father.
right. And
Mhm.
that's the thing about the term Father.
Is
Only
God
you
the
can only
everlasting
have,
Father?
yeah,
So
because you
what's the
can only have
problem?
one life giver. And but
I guess
he,
I
here
don't see the problem. You know, these are not descriptions of Hezekiah, right?
so what are you saying? That they're just titles of Hezekiah?
They're not titles of Hezekiah either.
Okay, so I must be confused. What do you say? How does this relate to Hezekiah exactly? Like, how would those titles relate to him?
They don't. That's what I'm telling you. They're theophoric. They're descriptions of God. That's how theophoric names are, right? We find them in
Right.
all ancient Near Eastern cultures. People had theophoric names,
Right. So the fact that Jesus was born thousands of years later to fulfill
but
this,
he didn't fulfill it.
was he not born?
He was born, but he certainly wasn't king. It says in verse 7 that he's going to be on the throne of King David.
He definitely was king. He definitely was
Oh,
king. He
certainly
was king.
wasn't.
I mean, above when he was crucified, I'm sure it said, "Here he's the king of the Jews."
Yeah, they were
He came
mocking
at
him.
yes, because he
Yeah,
claimed to be the king,
being
and they
mocked
did.
as a king doesn't make you a king.
That's true, but even King Hezekiah knew that well, not King Hezekiah, but Hezekiah, he knew that his position was something that was given by God. And
I know. No one's disagreeing with that.
even when King Cyrus found the scroll of Isaiah later,
That didn't
uh,
happen.
that didn't happen.
Not King Cyrus. You mean Josiah? And that was a Deuteronomy scroll.
So the Deuteronomy scroll. You're talking about the are we relating to the release of the Jews, the
No,
release of the Jews?
that's King Cyrus, but King Cyrus has nothing to do with finding a scroll from Isaiah.
No, because King Cyrus encountered a relationship with God, because when he took over Jerusalem later in history, he found the scroll of Isaiah, and it basically
That didn't happen.
stated. I'm sure I can find it right here for you.
Hmm.
It's it says, hold on, just so I can get it right. I don't want to just talk from Isaiah 45, I think maybe. Let me see here.
So the prophecy of Isaiah indicates that Yahweh is leading King Cyrus to free the Israelites. That's in the book of Isaiah.
Right, it's in the book of Isaiah. Let me just make sure, because Isaiah was written in what BC?
Well, it
Do you
was written
know?
over the course of about 200 years, right? So the first prophecy of Isaiah is roughly between 740 and 730 BCE. The last prophecy of Isaiah appears to be post-exilic, so maybe in the 5th century. So it's a couple hundred years.
And when did King Cyrus rise to power?
King Cyrus conquered what was left of the Midianite Babylon, or the Median Babylonian situation in 538, 539.
538, 539. So would that be before or after?
Before or after what?
The scroll of Isaiah. Well, you said it was written over 200 years. So what's your opinion?
Well, the scroll of Isaiah was written in pieces over the course of 200 to 300 years. So some parts of Isaiah would predate Cyrus, some would not. The second part, second Isaiah, Deutero Isaiah, that mentions King Cyrus was written probably as King Cyrus was mounting an attack against the Babylonians and the Medians.
So this is a post. This is a post. You're saying it's like it happened after, like King Cyrus already knew about this when he read Isaiah 45. King Cyrus already fulfilled these prophecies.
No, I don't think they were even prophecies. I think they were happening in real time. I think people were writing history as prophecies. The texts that we have all post-date Cyrus. They're all written in Aramaic style Hebrew, which post-date Cyrus.
And would you say King Cyrus was a Christian believing king, or was he more on the pagan side?
He's definitely pagan. In fact, he credited Marduk with the conquering of Jerusalem.
So, what do you think his incentive was for releasing all the captives and building the temple for the Jerusalem God Yahweh?
That was his. That was his MO in all the nations that he conquered. In all the nations that he conquered, he set people free and he allowed them to worship their own deities.
So, when as a Christian, as we understand the Bible, and I just want to get an understanding because I'm sure you're very well educated, right? You know that we read these things in parallels. Like there's physical fulfillments and there's spiritual fulfillments.
Well, I don't
For
think so. I
example,
think spiritual fulfillments are rubbish
why would you say that?
because they're nonsensical. They have no tie to reality, right? Anything could be a spiritual fulfillment, right?
Well, I can say anything could be a spiritual fulfillment, but not everything i- uh, is prophesized. Like the even the nation of Jerusalem, everything that's been happening to them, I would say that that's something that's been prophesized. I would
I
say
don't
that
think
the
so.
Bible leads to that. Even when Jesus talks about the lesson of the fig tree and the nation of Israel, and then that they will be scattered among the nations and they will be brought back and then they will get their land back. Like these are all prophecies. Like that's
Yeah,
why
but
we can
those texts
understand.
post-date Jesus, which is the problem, right? You have no way of demonstrating that Jesus uttered any of those words.
Well, well, that's the thing. Like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, like they're words in red, right? So they're not like Apostle Paul's words, just not like words that's been translated. Like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they were all there with him,
Well,
and
Mark wasn't,
you
neither
know,
was Luke.
well,
Theoretically,
the
according to tradition, Mark is the cousin of Barnabas, mentioned in Colossians 4. He wasn't a
well,
disciple.
okay, well, the disciples, right? Whatever ones of the disciples, like it was written in red, so we can understand that these are Jesus's actual
No,
words.
that's what I'm saying is you have no idea if Jesus actually said that.
I mean, the fact that it came to be, we can have pretty much a decent amount of faith that
No.
if these are the words of God.
No, because if somebody's literally writing after the diaspora, it's 100% that it's going to come to be. That's how fake prophecy works.
No, because even if that's the case, right, and they lived 100 years after, these are fulfillments that are being fulfilled right in front of our eyes. Like 1948
No,
is when Israel became a nation.
no, it didn't.
So it didn't become a nation in 1948.
So you're referring to the prophecy, the so-called prophecy in Isaiah 66. First of all,
I'm
that's
referring
not what
to
Isaiah 66 says. It doesn't say
I'm
that
referring
one day in the distant future, Israel will become a nation again. And I think when you use the words Israel, I think you're misusing the words Israel. You're using Israel as a physical land. I'm not. Israel is anyone that's an Israelite, whether they're in the land or out of the land. So the nation of Israel wasn't birthed in a day. They did get their land back, though.
I want to be clear that I was more referencing I want to say it's like Matthew 24 where Jesus talks about the end time. I'm sorry, I'm fairly new to it, but like I know like Matthew 24, Jesus speaks about the lesson of the fig tree and
Hmm.
the end times and what's to come. And
What
even if these
Matthew,
people wrote this after, these are all
Lord,
things that
I don't want to interrupt you, but if you go any further, I, I'm trying to save you. I'm going to save you some work by cutting you off. Sorry that I cut you off, but
no
I
worries,
want
no
to
worries.
save you a little bit of work, okay? Because in Matthew 24, he quite literally said that he's coming back. The second coming is going to be before that generation passes away. It talks about the signs. His disciples ask him about the signs of the end. It says, immediately after the suffering of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. That's Daniel chapter 7. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So this is clearly the second coming. He talks about it again in the very next chapter. And then the part that you reference, he says, from the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branches become tender and put forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all things have taken place, or all these things have taken place. And those things haven't taken place, and he didn't come back within that generation.
Right. That's kind of my point. Like that wasn't for that generation.
It
This is a
was
prophecy. What do you mean it was for that? What? How can you say that? Like, what's your basis on that?
because he says it. He says, this generation will not pass away. That's this generation. That's what that means. If it's a future generation, it would be that generation. If it was a future generation, it would also be a meaningless statement, right? If you just said the future generation that sees this happening will be alive, that's a meaningless statement. Obviously, they're going to be alive. They're witnessing it happening. It's a meaningless thing to say. However, it does have meaning if you're giving a timeline saying, listen, this generation will not pass away before all these things happen.
So, just to be clear, you believe that this passage is talking about the people 2,000 years ago and their generation, or do you believe that our generation is shared?
No, their generation. The generation's either 40 or 100 years, depending on what Bible passage you turn to.
So you interpret that as Jesus saying, "I'm going to come back within the next 40 years."
Yeah, because he says the same thing elsewhere, and Paul taught that.
And where did Paul teach that he would be coming back in the next 40 years? Because that's not clear. That's not clear.
Yeah, First
I
Thessalonians
understand the
chapter
perspective.
4, he says it. And then he also says it again in 2 Corinthians chapter 7. If you go to Thessalonians, he's under the impression that Jesus is coming back imminent, right? And it says,
Under
we,
the impression.
yeah, because that's probably what he was told.
I mean, that's how they were feeling that at the time. Like, they were able to see it
Yeah,
first.
yeah, they thought the world was coming to an end in their lifetime. That's why when he's questioned by the church at Thessalonica about those who have already passed away, what are we going to do? Some of us have already died, right? Some of our loved ones are already gone, right? So what are we going to do, right? How does this work with the eschatological scene? And so Paul writes to him, or writes to the church, to alleviate some of their fears. And he says, we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about these those who have died, so that you may not grieve as others who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have died. For this we declare to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will by no means precede those who have died. So Paul is suggesting that he's going to be remaining. He says, we who are still alive.
These are, I don't know the words, but like I want to say parallels, like a double. I don't know when I want to say entendres, but um, when Jesus is, no, I'm sorry. This is Paul. Now, when he said that he was supposed to be coming back within the next 40 years, um, you can understand biblically that that's not the case, but
No, that is the
the
case.
lesson of the
He
lesson of the fig tree
he
is
said
not something that could
he's
be revealed at that time.
it is. It's easy. He's not saying it's a prophecy. The fig tree is not a prophecy. Just so
Why
you
would you
were
say
aware,
that?
because he didn't say it was a prophecy. He said,
He said, "Learn the
he
lesson
said,
of the fig tree."
take note from the fig tree, right? When you see the signs of harvest, harvest is near. So then,
Right. So what's the lesson of the fig tree?
as you see these signs happening, know that harvest is near.
So like when you think about the prophecies of the Bible, let's just say this. Like when you think about the prophecies of the Bible, like there's prophecies of Jerusalem, like the actual land. There's prophecies that were saying that
Yeah.
it was going to be taken down, destroyed, whatever. 70 years, not a brick left. Things
Oh, it
happen.
didn't say
Romans
that.
invade. It did say
It
that. It
didn't.
did say
It
not a
didn't
brick.
say 770 years. You're conflating the prophecy of Jeremiah 25 with what Jesus said.
Okay. Okay, well, I don't mean to conflate, but there are accuracies that I
They're
want to say
not.
70 AD, 70 AD,
No,
maybe that's
because
the.
none of the 'cause we have no evidence that any of those predated 70 is what I'm saying. But even if they did, this is not a unique prediction. In fact, the Jewish rabbis agreed outside of Christianity. They agreed as well that the temple had to be destroyed. They thought it was happening imminently. If you read Sanhedrin 97, I believe it's Sanhedrin 97 A or B, I forget which one. But in Sanhedrin 97, even the Jewish rabbis that aren't part of the Christian movement think that the temple needs to be destroyed to fulfill the prophecy of Daniel. So, like, it wasn't even a unique prophecy, even if it was before Jesus, even if it was a legitimate prophecy.
Okay, so you take the basis of things were written like around the same time. So like these are kind of post dated events that people were recording. Like it's just like people were just recording it in the Bible. These aren't prophecies, but these are a record
Well,
of events.
what I'm saying is, if you want to turn to prophecies, you should turn to prophecies that we know predated the events, right? So look at the prophecies about the Messiah. Those were given in the Old Testament. We don't
Right.
have exact time frames on when they were given, but we know that they were given before Jesus existed, which means that's probably the best place to look. When you look at the predictions made by Jesus, Jesus's and Paul's own predictions fail. In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus says again that some of you standing here will not taste death. So some of you standing here will still be alive when you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, on the clouds of glory with the angels and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
But again, that didn't happen, right? So Jesus was just a failed end times apocalyptic preacher. He was creating a death cult, man.
So okay, that's your perspective. So, but like, I just want. I know you already have like the mindset of like, okay, if there's spiritual prophecy, it must be mumbo jumbo because there's no physical manifestation of it. But like when Jesus was saying everything, everything was said in a parable, right? Which means that everything wasn't clear to them, right? Everything
So,
wasn't absorbed,
yeah, but why do I care what
which
Jesus
means
said?
well, you just have to understand the context, right? If Jesus is saying
I
eat my
do.
flesh and blood, if Jesus is saying eat my flesh and blood, he's not saying be a cannibal and if you're a cannibal, you'll live forever, right? Like there's a spiritual aspect to
Yeah, but Jesus
what
didn't give the prophecies.
Jesus gave prophecies.
No, Jesus didn't give the messianic prophecies, is what I'm saying.
No, right, exactly.
Right.
So
So the way Jesus spoke is irrelevant to how to interpret the prophecies.
every prophecy, every prophetic Old Testament passage that might relate or completely talks about the coming of Jesus, or even in Daniel. Like I'm sure Daniel's prophecies are. I'm sure you're pretty knowledgeable on it, and from
Daniel's
my
one of my
understanding,
favorite prophetic books, actually.
right. So from my understanding, right, and this is just what I'm taught, right. From my understanding, Daniel was the one who basically predicted the next couple hundreds years of what was going to happen from kingdom to kingdom, and that's what the vision of the statue meant.
He didn't, though, unfortunately.
So you know, it was Assyria, the 10 kingdoms. You already know the 10 toes, one breaks up. Like I can, you already know. Like I'm not even gonna go into it,
It
but that
was
was my understanding of it.
Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece.
Right, right, and then Rome. I think at the end.
Nope, Rome's not included.
Okay, so from my understanding, he basically got it all right.
He
What
didn't.
what would you say in context to that? Yeah.
Well, because he didn't get it right, right? So even if you were being gracious and you agreed that the prophecy actually came from a guy named Daniel during the time of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, which it certainly didn't, but even if you did, he still didn't get it right because according to the prophecy of the statue, the Grecian kingdom was supposed to be the last. Also, Bertram, thank you for the fireworks.
But from why would you say that? Because there's a little horn that comes out.
Yeah, Antiochus Epiphanes.
Antiochus Epiphanes. Can you remind me what that is?
Yeah, Antiochus Epiphanes was a military leader of the Greeks, specifically the Greeks who came and conquered Jerusalem during the time period of Judas Maccabeus in the 2nd century, which is what Daniel chapter 9 is referring to, which is why like everything in Daniel, when it talks about events in the 2nd century, it magically gets those events right. When it starts talking about events happening in Daniel's time period, 300 years prior, it screws the pooch, has no idea what's happening in his time period.
But you got to admit that even if you believe that, that the last part was wrong, like up until then is pretty fairly accurate to the T.
Well, I don't think so. Not if it was given in the 2nd century.
But it wasn't.
Well, it
But you
was.
believe it.
No, it absolutely was. Yeah.
So you believe that it was written after the fact.
I know it was. Yeah.
So in Greece time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was literally written during the tail end of the Persian period, early period of the Greeks, or even towards the tail end of the Greek Empire.
Just factors, chapters.
So the reason why he knows about Babylon and Media and Persia and Greece is because it already happened. And we don't have any texts that would indicate that it was written during the time period of Nebuchadnezzar. The text that we have is written mostly in Hasmonean Hebrew, which wasn't instituted until after the fall of the Greeks. Small portions of Daniel are written actually in Greek. Those are mostly in the Dead Sea Scrolls, like the Daniel editions. And then we've got a small, like 2 or 3 chapters written in late stage Aramaic, that which you would expect if it was being written by somebody during the end of the Aramaic period, beginning of the Grecian period.
Okay. Okay. So I'm understanding. So you're saying if Daniel was alive during that time period, then that basically invalidates the prophecies because he just basically wrote them after the fact.
Well, I actually don't think Daniel existed. I think Daniel is a mythological figure, and one of the reasons why I believe this is because Daniel, or Daniel is a mythological figure already in roughly that time period that would have been known in that region, which is why Daniel is compared to great figures like Moses and whatnot prior to his actual existence. So I think Ezekiel mentions Daniel. Hold on, just a second, double check on that one. So there's one mention of a mythological figure named Daniel in Ezekiel. Even there we go, Ezekiel 14:14. Ezekiel is mentioning some figures. He says, "Mortal, when a land sins against me by acting faithlessly, and I stretch out my hand against it and cut off its supply of bread and send famine upon it and cut off from its humans and animals, even if Noah, Daniel, and Job, these three were in it, they would save only their own lives." Now, the reason why this is important is because, classically, the ancient Jews didn't believe that Job was a real person. I don't know if you knew this, but the ancient Jews actually understood Job as a mythological figure. And the story of Job was a theological story, not a historical story. It was about the theological point being made, and it's laid out like an ancient play, like what the Greeks would give.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I can see that.
Now, some of them did believe in Noah as a real person, but the interesting thing is both Daniel and Job had parallels in the ancient Near East as being mythological wise men. So it seems to be that the author of Daniel was picking up on the name Daniel because it would have been significant to the audience. They would have known about it already. But I don't think the real Daniel ever existed.
Okay, okay. It was
After
to
that,
my understanding. You want to add to that? You said.
Sorry, what's up, Tiny?
yeah,
Sorry.
I would like to add. What's up,
Go ahead.
Joseph?
Yeah.
What's up, Lord? How's it going?
What's up?
I was
Everything's
just
good.
talking to Rabbi Bert the other day, and he was telling me about how the archetype of Jesus is more Hellenistic than it is Judaic.
Oh, for sure.
And
Yeah.
he was saying like the archetypes of Moses, Daniel, Job, like it's very humble beginnings, and then they reached a certain level of kingship, and it's kind of different for Jesus. He had very what is it, or respectable or very like elaborate beginnings, like his birth. He was visited by the three wise men, and like his story became like a tragedy at the end instead of a success story. So that indicates that it's more of a Roman Hellenistic type of archetype than it is a Judaic one. And I found that very fascinating. I just wanted to add to that.
No, it's actually a really good observation. I think it is the case. The Gospels do a lot of stuff as well that you find in Greek mythology, um, which you would expect if somebody would took the figure of Jesus and mythologized him.
Yeah. Yeah. See, like as a Christian, like your
Right.
your understanding growing up is like, okay, like Old Testament written in Aramaic and like everything else, New Testament is like where Greek and everything comes later. Hebrew, I'm sorry, Hebrew. So that's kind of like how I imagine it. So like it's kind of like a paradigm shift to understand like the time periods and basically what makes sense contextually, era to era, and basically your perspective on uh, basically why you feel the way you feel.
Right. So, like, I think my personal opinion is that I think Jesus was under the impression that Daniel was already fulfilled during the Maccabean revolt, and that he was going to fulfill the prophecy a second time, which is actually kind of the
Yeah.
case. Like almost all the actual prophecies that are given to Jesus are like some sort of dual prophecy, where like it actually wasn't
Right.
about me originally, but I'm fulfilling it in like a spiritual sense, right?
Right. That's what I was trying to explain earlier. Like that's how we were kind of like taught to understand like everything has like a dual prophecy. So
Right,
but
but
like more physical and spiritual, but like you're saying that they're both actually manifested physically, right?
so I'll give you a little pushback on why I don't think spiritual prophecies or spiritual fulfillments are meaningful, right? Because
Mm.
to me, a prophecy does a couple things. It gives you typically like a clear timeline, or at least some kind of
Mm.
timeline, and then it gives you like facts, like so
Right.
and so is going to do such and such, right? Which is why
Right.
in Deuteronomy 18 you're told that if you think that a prophet is speaking from God, you can just test it and see if the prophecy comes true, right? Now,
Right.
if you're saying no, the prophecy now has a second meaning, but the second meaning is actually divorced from the original context, and it's divorced from the original people that it was intended for, and the author didn't even know they were uttering the prophecy. It was even secret to the author. That to me, it sounds like you just don't actually like what the prophecy says and you wanted to say something else. And so you're saying, well, I mean, this sounds similar. And I'll give you one example and then I'll pause. But like, so for example, I'm cursed to root for the Cleveland Browns. So like if I said, listen, 2025 is going to be our year. We're going to win the Super Bowl, right? Now imagine that we end up winning a bunch of games and we even beat the Steelers twice. And then say we lose in like the second round of the playoffs. I couldn't then go and say, yeah, but we did win the Super Bowl because it felt like the Super Bowl. It was because the Browns are so bad that beating the Steelers twice is like winning the Super Bowl. That's the equivalent of giving a spiritual interpretation. You're saying it doesn't actually match the original context of the prophecy. It's just similar. You know?
Yeah, that makes sense because that's literally the basis of our whole theology, and that's why it's probably difficult to have dialogue with a Christian because, that's literally like we believe that everything is a copy and shadow, whether it is the temple, whether it is
Right.
the words of prophecies. So I totally understand what you're saying. It just makes so much sense. It's clicking to me.
And
Clicking to
now,
me.
just adding on to that, not to put more fuel on the fire, but like, so what the Christians did with Jesus, the Mormons did with Joseph Smith. If you go and look at the Mormon doctrines and teachings, like they are adding like third layer interpretations of the prophecies, saying that they were types and foreshadowings of Joseph Smith, right? Because once you've concluded that you can do types and shadows and foreshadowings, well, there's really no limit to what they could be about. They can be about anything.
Right. Right. It literally that's the thing about it. Like I've been going through these parallels for you could imagine how many years growing faith, quote unquote, uh, creating parallels and creating correlations.
Right.
It really is endless, and when you really think about the perspectives of atheists and Christians, it's just so mind-boggling to me right now to be like, okay, it works in either way. It works in either way, and either way is just as powerful. Either way is just as powerful. It's so interesting.
Yeah, so the thing I would suggest is just spend a little bit of time thinking about this, right? So if Jesus didn't fulfill any of the prophecies literally, then it seems like the prophecies that were given just didn't come true because like even like a famous one, about Jesus riding the donkey into Jerusalem, technically two donkeys in Matthew. And it says this was to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord, which is a quotation from Zechariah 9:9. But if you go to Zechariah 9, it's like really super clear that what's going to happen is it's going to be like an actual victorious king. It says, let me grab it real quick. Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Then it says, he will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he will command peace to the nations, and his dominion will be from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. Well, like, shoot, once you include the next verse, that prophecy doesn't sound like Jesus at all. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Literally, like I said, it's like a paradigm shift to understand. Okay, so if who's that? Ezekiel,
That was Zechariah 9.
Zechariah. Okay, Zechariah. He wrote that. Who do you think fulfilled that? Actually, just out of curiosity.
So I don't think anyone did. In fact, this is one of those prophecies that appears, as far as I can tell, is probably a legitimate prophecy. Now, there is some scholarly debate. In fact, there's a lot of agreement, not just debate. There's a lot of people in the scholarly realms who think that this prophecy was actually to it was about one of the kings at that time period. But like to demonstrate who that would be, I think is an insurmountable task. So I'm willing to accept that it's just a legitimate prophecy about a king. Who the king is, I don't know. But if it's a legit prophecy, it just seems to have never been fulfilled.
Because you don't think that it actually happened. You don't trust the accounts in the New Testament.
Well, no, even if you believe the New Testament, it didn't happen because Jesus was never a king. And the prophecies clearly state that he's going to be a king in Israel and defeat Israel's enemies. Even Luke chapter 1 picks up on this. Luke chapter 1, Jesus is prophesied over when he's like an infant or even smaller. And Zechariah declares that God has sent a savior from his people to rescue them from the hands of their enemies and all that hate them so that they can worship Yahweh in peace. Well, yeah, that's what the prophets did declare. They declared that there'd be a victorious king who defeated their enemies, but just Jesus never did it.
So, okay, that makes sense. I would say he was, in a way, right, that he definitely was a king to a peoples who were like, he was a different kind of king. He's not your normal pilot. He's not your normal emperor, but he definitely was a king that's more described in the Bible. You know, not like a king of the world, but like a king that kind of transcends the you know the ideas of man.
Right, but to me that's a meaningless statement, right? You're just saying, well, I know he wasn't really a king; he's a spiritual king, but like, I mean, that's just making an unfalsifiable claim. I can just say that I'm the spiritual king, and you can't prove me wrong.
I mean, I would believe you if you died and came back to life.
Well, I don't think Jesus did, and even if he did, I don't think that would be proof that he was a king.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
If Jesus died and came back to life, you still wouldn't think that he was a king of the sorts?
No, because like a king is a real definition, right? To be a king in Israel, you have to sit on the throne in Israel and act as king. And until he does it, he's not king. Now you could say, shit, he's going to do it one day when he comes back. And listen, when he does it, when he comes back, he'll be the king. But until then, he's not the king.
But you would be able to clearly see that this is a king of life, right?
Oh, it doesn't say
They
king
have
of
some
life.
sort of authority. They have some sort of authority over life itself, right? I guess king would be like an authority term. So if somebody Jesus died and came back to life, you would recognize some sort of authority, right?
No, I don't know if I would, right? Because if I accepted that Jesus died and came back to life, I would also accept that the other people claiming to die and come back to life also did.
I don't know anybody who claimed that. Who claimed that they got away with it?
Alcestis, Aristeas. There's quite a few people in the ancient world that died and came back. The one of them actually, or two of them got caught. Actually, one of them by accident. One of them maybe on purpose. So there was a follower of Pythagoras that a lot of people thought was like semi-divine, named Zalmoxis, and Zalmoxis specifically faked his resurrection. He disappeared for about 2 to 3 years, made people believe he was dead, and then showed up again saying he rose from the dead. He got caught. But others, like Aristeas, have dozens of testimonies of people claiming to witness his death and then claiming to see him risen from the dead later, and even people after that claiming that the spirit of Aristeas came to them in real life. And they even had statues to Aristeas in ancient Rome, believing that he was elected into the divine council of the gods because he resurrected from the dead.
Well, genuinely, right? Genuinely, if you truly were able to see it for your own eyes instead of hearing it, seeing it, believing it, or trusting other people, and you genuinely saw that, would you recognize some sort of authority like that?
Listen, if I found a guy who resurrected from the dead and like had supernatural powers, I would certainly believe that this thing was supernatural. That's for sure. I have no reason to believe that it's Jesus, though, which is the other problem, right? So, like, even in your worldview, you understand that evil entities can manifest pretending to be Jesus. right? So this is the other problem we have is we'd have to find a way to validate that the spiritual entity appearing to me was in fact Jesus. But we can grant that it is. We could just grant that he did some sort of a trick that convinced me he was Jesus, right?
Right.
Now, that may be true. He might be able to convince me that he is Jesus and that he did rise from the dead. One thing that he won't be able to do is convince me that he fulfilled the messianic prophecies, because unfortunately words have meanings and he just didn't do it.
What about all the people who willingly died in the worst ways and got crucified and beaten and martyred? And what do you think was the incentive behind that, knowing that maybe it wasn't even true
Well, I think a
for
lot of
thousands?
them believed it. That's why they died for it. I think a lot of people are willing. I don't think a lot of people are so attached to their mortal life as you might think. There's a lot of people willing to get rid of their mortal life, but even like there were martyrs even in Mormonism. Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram were both martyrs for the religion.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I guess.
And the same was true for the 916 people that died from drinking the Kool-Aid for Jim Jones, right? They were willing to give their lives.
Right, but it's not the same as crucifix. Like the Romans hated, you know what I mean? They hated Christians. There was really no good reason to be a Christian back then. It just wasn't good for Christians. Like you were really tortured in the worst ways, burned at the stake, used as decorations, beheaded. Like, I get drinking Kool-Aid, I get maybe being a martyr, but that's something that nobody wants to go through, especially if there's any inclination of that it's a lie.
No, they're still
Because
doing it right now. The people that are martyring for the faith don't think it's a lie. They think it's true. Same reason why Muslims martyr themselves for the faith of Muhammad.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like people are always willing to martyr themselves for a religion.
Right. But it's not a choice of a Christian, right? Like we were martyred, right? Like we don't really want to die. We don't really want to be tortured. Like we don't really want to be, burned at the stake. But these are things that were put in front of us, and we had to make a choice. Like I get, dying for your faith, or but it just seems more plausible that the people who witnessed the resurrection, even the accounts that were written by the enemies of Jesus, like
who?
it feels more historically accurate, especially even that it's like 2025 and that we have a whole yearly counting system since he's been here. It's like
the calendar system was developed by in the 1500s by Pope Gregory.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I just mean more like the general character, like the BC, like AD kind of.
Yeah.
Like that come like it was created and established, I guess, in whatever 15.
By the church, though.
The Bible was
the Chinese
the
didn't do it.
The Bible. You said the Chinese didn't do it?
Yeah, the Chinese didn't do it. The Jews didn't do it.
It was the church, right?
Native Americans didn't do it, right? I mean, obviously, the Christians who think that Jesus is like the defining moment in history they're going to redo their timeline,
right?
But we would expect that from the Christians, wouldn't we?
Yeah, you definitely would.
I mean, it just makes sense. That's like the Julian calendar, which was very similar to the Gregorian calendar. The Julian calendar was developed part of necessity, but partly because Julian thought he was that much of a badass. You know what I mean? He wanted a name after himself.
Well, Same guy who developed the fries, the Julian fries.
See, I don't actually know. I don't know any fry lore, unfortunately.
Cut fries. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I really love him so much.
Well, Lord, I appreciate you coming up and having a decent chat with me. I think these conversations are fun for me and probably for everybody else. And these are difficult topics to talk about. And I remember being a young man in religion class. I had 12 years of Catholic school and asking a lot similar questions, probably, and talking about topics that you're talking about now. And I remember I got to a point where I asked my teacher, I was like, well, it seems like we can't really prove any of this to be true. So like, how could we convince others that it was? And she's like, well, you can't. Like, it's not a fact, it's a faith. Like, you either have the faith or you don't. And she's like, I don't think you should be in the business of trying to prove factually that it's all true. I might find that you're going to end up in disappointmentville. She didn't say disappointmentville, but that's basically what she's saying. So, but I think that's a healthier place to be. So like, if you have a religion, I think it's healthy to be in the part where you're like, this is what I believe. I could be wrong, but it works for me, right? But the minute you get to a point where you're like, everyone else around me is wrong, they're all going to hell, God hates them, and now, I want bad things for them. That's where I would draw the line. I would say, okay, well, at that point, let's have a conversation about your religion, because I don't think you can substantiate your religion being true. Maybe you shouldn't be shoving it on everybody else,
Oh yeah. Yeah, and this is exactly why I entered the lab, because it's hard not to be taught from a bias when when you believe something. It's so important to be able to have dialogue with. And you were fantastic. Like, you know what you're talking about. You were able to give me facts. You were even to pull up scripture, which is something that a Christian can appreciate, because not only are you talking from a historical standpoint, you're talking from a biblical standpoint, which goes hand in hand. So I can always go to anybody and ask for them or ask for more knowledge or whatever, but I don't want to consistently get a Christian bias.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
Well, let me give you one. I'm going to give you one piece of homework that I think you may not appreciate immediately, but 10 years from now you'll appreciate. Okay. There was a study Bible that almost all the people who went to my seminary was instructed to get. It was like the top recommended study Bible. It was the New Oxford Annotated Study Bible. If you want to know like what actual academic professionals are saying about these passages in the Bible, I would get that study Bible. It's an academic level study Bible. It will give you homework, because sometimes the study notes, you have to learn new things that aren't in the Bible to understand the study note. And that happens sometimes, but it's a good it's a good place to start when you want to start diving into the religion and knowing, okay, what is true versus what is tradition.
Okay. I'll definitely do that homework. I got something to do.
Hey, man, I appreciate you coming up and being cordial.
Thank you. No problem. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Have a good one.